Nate Taglin was a 17-year-old boy in high school. He lived with his parents and younger brother and was regarded by his teachers as smart, kind, and polite. He was fluent in English, Russian, Hebrew, and was also studying Spanish, French, German, and Italian. However, Nate was autistic, and his seizure and impulsive problem began in 2005. He would ask his parents to put him in restraints so that he didn't hurt himself until he regained control. His parents gently and lovingly helped him deal with his ailment, and Nate was slowly but surely on his way to recovery. However, the government thought it was smarter than Nate's parents. And at 2:20 p.m. on January 12, 2007, 4 sheriffs, by request of Child Protection Services, forcefully took Nate from his home against his own will. Handcuffed, he was taken to the Costa Mesa Developmental Center, a state-run mental institution. For over a year, he was deprived of books, never allowed to see his family, and forced to take prescribed medication in large doses. The side effects of this medication landed him in the emergency room several times. How is this permitted in our supposedly free society? What could possibly give the government this much authority? United Nations Charter, Article 9, Convention on the Rights of the Child. A child shall not be separated from his or her parents against their will except when competent authorities, subject to judicial review, determine, in accordance with applicable law and procedures, that such separation is necessary for the best interests of the child. On the surface, this seems like a harmless and even beneficial law. However, written between these lines is a detrimental threat to the rights of parents of the United States. In the time we have today, I'll take you through the current situation concerning the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, or UNCRC, and why we should act to preserve the rights of parents throughout the United States. Article 9 of the United Nations Charter states that if any child's current situation is deemed by competent authorities and judicial review as not in the best interests of that child, the court holds the right to separate the child from the parent, even if it's against both the parent and child's will. Now, why is family so important? It's because it's the heart of an individual's life. You're born into your family, you grow up in your family, and they protect you. But it's the parents that play the most influential and important roles. They lead, they guide, they decide. ParentalRights.org, December 26, 2008. Quote, as a legally binding international treaty, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is capable of permanently altering the role of the parent within the American family. If ratified, the UNCRC becomes the law of the land, unable to be held in check by either state or national legislation. Now, this is a very important point. International treaties such as the UNCRC trump both state and national legislation. This cannot be fought on a local level. Now, the UNCRC is currently not ratified by the United States as law. However, it's very close. Michael Ferris, a constitutional lawyer and founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, wrote on December 16, 2008, quote, I was in the United States Senate this past week meeting with lawyers for a Senate office. They told me directly what I have been hearing indirectly on a regular basis ever since the election. Those who want to change family policy in America to comply with international law are preparing a full-scale effort to seek ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child during this next Congress. They intend to use children's health care as leverage to seek ratification of this UN Child's Rights Treaty, end quote. They're justifying the UNCRC using health care. No one argues with health care. However, once ratified, any judge could use the UNCRC in any courtroom, exercise that authority at his own discretion. If the court deems that the government can do a better job, it will have the authority to take the child away. Now, you may be asking, why do people want the UNCRC ratified? What's the motivation? Well, there are parents that abuse and neglect their children. Therefore, a common argument for the UNCRC is that children need their own rights to secure their protection. However, I was interviewing Dr. Brian Ray, founder of the National Home Education Research Institute, and his response to this argument is that there are already laws in place that protect children from abuse and neglect. Well, now you may be asking, well, then what's the harm of passing this law? If it's just the same thing, why is it so threatening? That's the point. It's not the same thing. The underlying threat of international treaties lies in the evidence I stated earlier. International treaties have more power than state and national legislation. This means that any parental rights legislation that any state could pass on a state level would be considered null and void by our courtrooms because of the liberties that international treaties give to the government. The UNCRC goes intrusively beyond the legislation that we have in place because of the nature of its authority. It's a scheme. If our government can slip the UNCRC into our state court systems under the name of protecting abused children or under the name of health care, then they can convince America that their government is protecting them when in actuality they're seeking more and more control over our lives. The ratification of this treaty is a threat in our country today. However, in many other countries, this threat has become a reality. Chris Wiley, stationed on the American Air Force Base in Italy, returned from a training mission where she had been gone for a month to find that her 2 girls, ages 5 and 7, had been removed from the base by Italian authorities. The girls had been staying with Chris's fiancé on the base, and the government suspected child abuse. However, a hospital examination proved that there were absolutely no grounds for this accusation. ParentalRights.org concerning this incident says, quote, "Apparently nothing was all the Italian authorities needed to seize the children. Upon her return, Chris began the month-long struggle to regain custody of her own children." All it would take is a sympathetic national Congress, and this convention would be ratified in the US. However, there is a way to combat the authority of a foreign treaty. Michael Ferris writes, quote, "The only way to protect the rights of parents from the destructive policies contained in the UNCRC is through an amendment to the US Constitution." That's right, our national constitution is the only power capable of combating the authority of a foreign treaty. This is our last hope of protecting ourselves. Michael Ferris and several others have launched a campaign for a constitutional amendment that will secure the rights of parents. However, they need more people behind this cause. Michael Ferris writes, quote, "Our proposed parental rights amendment will permanently stop this treaty. So we have a 1-2-punch plan for the internationalists. First, we must build a huge grassroots movement of patriotic Americans who believe that good families should be able to raise their children without worrying about compliance with international law. Second, these same grassroots forces need to convince our elected officials that we are not content with defeating this treaty for today alone. We insist on a permanent solution. We need the Parental Rights Amendment." End quote. A section of the Declaration of Independence reads, "Mankind is more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right and it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. My friends, the more ground we allow to slip away, the harder it will be to get it back. So often we don't see and we don't care what goes on in our Capitol buildings because it doesn't touch us. But the UNCRC pierces to the heart of the American family and shoots a fatal arrow through American freedom. The campaign needs more people. I'm one person and I'm asking you to be another. Person by person, family by family, we can fight for truth. Go online to www.parentalrights.org or simply type Michael Ferris Constitutional Amendment into any search engine. You'll find it. And when you do, sign up as a supporter of the Parental Rights Amendment. Second, ask your friends and family to sign up. And there are numerous ways, both large and small, to volunteer in order to promote the parental rights cause. And finally, you can contribute to the campaign financially, and they are grateful to receive anything that you give. Michael Ferris writes, "This issue is not a small issue. It's the biggest fight we've ever been in our lives. I'm going to suggest to you that there's a tsunami coming. The earthquake has already happened and the wave is headed towards the United States. Now there's still time to build a tsunami wall, but the question is, are we going to get up high enough so that we see the tsunami and we build the wall?" End quote. This is a battle, my friends. A battle of truth against lies, right against wrong, freedom against subjection. How far do they have to go before we decide they've been going too far for too long? When our government steps between parent and child, they've gone too far. This is it. We ought to be up in arms. Will you fight with us? Will you fight? Thank you.